to part 7 of the Mummy You're Not Broken audiobook, written and read by me, Anna Cusack. This episode looks at feelings of overwhelm in motherhood. It is the longest chapter by far, and rightly so. The sheer size and weight of the load mothers carry within our families and our society is really intense. It can look as though the mums around us are managing fine, so we tend to feel like failures in some way for struggling, but the reality is that the majority of mothers are not coping. Here's the current situation and some ideas on what we can do to go about changing it. Before we start this chapter, I just want to remind you that you can order a physical copy of this book and also see a full reference list at www.annacusack.com.au/book. You can also head to that website to jump into my membership for either $35 Australian dollars a month standard price or $25 if you're experiencing financial pressure or identify as someone from a marginalised group. The membership is a subscription which gives you access to a monthly group workshop or online circle, 2 days of private voice message mentoring per month with me, and also includes an active allyship contribution to pay the people behind the diverse voices you'll be hearing from in season 3 of the podcast for their time and expertise. There are no lock-in contracts and you can sub in and out at any time. If you're not up for the whole membership deal but want to support the podcast and its guests, you can become a patron of the podcast for $5 a month. Okay, let's get started. Chapter 6, Overwhelm. Imagine showing up to a new job on your first day. You are exhausted. Yesterday you ran the marathon that you had trained 9 months for, and you are so glad it's finally over. You arrive at the worksite tired, dehydrated, and hungry. You may be glowing with pride, or you may be grazed and stitched after your race didn't quite go as you'd hoped. Either way, you are definitely still bleeding and far from at your best. Snap to it, woman. That is behind you now. No debrief with your training or race support team was offered. The details of the event aren't that important, so it's best just to forget about it anyway. It's time to refocus. You collect your name tag from the front desk. Mum. Your mission, which you have little choice but to accept, is to keep a small human alive and mould them into a functioning member of society. There is no on-the-job training and no inbuilt mentoring. There is no fire drill, no instructional videos that seem relevant to your exact human. A who to call in an emergency sheet gets stuck to your fridge, but what counts as an emergency isn't really made clear. Chin up, new recruit. This is just the way it is. A few days later, a nurse calls your phone. She asks if you are doing okay at your new job, to which you respond, "Yeah, I suppose so, but I'm getting some pain while breastfeeding and zero sleep." She asks if you have other team members on hand, to which you respond, "I am alone, with the baby, 10 hours a day." She asks if you or the baby are dying, to which you answer, "I don't think so." No referral is made, and if it is, your case isn't urgent, so follow-up is unlikely. Congratulations! You have just passed your only formal performance review and are now officially on your own. Despite this seal of approval, you will be subject to judgment and unhelpful critique at every turn on an ongoing basis, while also being told you know your baby best. You will be on shift 24 hours a day, either in a physical or mental capacity, 7 days a week for approximately the next 18 years, or longer if you have subsequent children. There is no allocated sick or annual leave, minimal pay, and very little water cooler banter. If you are lucky, you might get a lunch break once a month that will be labelled as self-care time, so you better use it to just relax. Required skills for this position include chief dairy cow and or bottle provision professional, shusher, swayer, patter, butt wiper, entertainer, neural development facilitator, comedian, translator, personal stylist, medication dispensary assistant, advocate, book reader, soother, and songstress. As time goes on, new required skills are added to your portfolio. Personal shopper, head chef, speech development officer, workplace health and safety officer, entertainment provider, socialization strategist, nature guide, first aid administrator, lifeguard, mosquito squatter, carer screener, snot wiper, emotion coach and counselor, eloquence tutor, playdate coordinator, screen time limiter, school readiness coach and assessor, birthday party planner, holiday suitcase packer, Christmas present purchaser, sports team manager, canteen volunteer, and chauffeur. Did I mention that sleep is for the weak? It is anticipated you will sacrifice around 25 days worth of sleep in the first year of each child's life, accumulating the equivalent of almost an entire week of sleep debt more than fathers by your baby's first birthday. If you are fortunate enough to have multiple children at different ages and stages of development, the role of mum will include both of these skill sets simultaneously, with the addition of sibling rumble referee to the aforementioned list. You have had practice on the job now, so it will be easier than the first time around. As such, there is no need to re-advertise the position at any point. It is expected that all who accept this position are naturals at all its components, and you will adapt on the fly with ease. In case you get bored with all the free time that comes with child raising, you're in luck. The modern mum job also includes the role of domestic goddess, which grandmothers world over will tell you is easier now because dishwashers exist. Luckily, the time saved from scrubbing pots and pans has been reallocated to childcare, as per the job description above. Roles as self-care junkie, grateful daughter, primary pet care coordinator, compassionate friend, and family social media profile curator are also inherent to this position. An optional add-on is the position of interested A-grade student, as it is essential for mothers to set an example of lifelong learning for their children. It goes without saying that mum is also a highly committed paid worker, a financially independent woman who doesn't rely on a man, and/or her breadwinning partner's #1 fan. She is also a passionate lover with flawless skin, unstained clothing, and a love for organic vegetable gardening that she shares with her children. Still, your kids come first, and you love them above all else. Is this really the job I willingly applied for, you wonder? The one everyone said was the best thing they've ever done? How come no one told me it would be like this? On reflection, the clues have been there all along. As discussed earlier, our language gives us a hint, with the verbs of mothering and fathering holding very different meanings. Our celebration days are another giveaway. Father's Day is touted as a day for dads to connect with their family, how novel, whereas Mother's Day is a day for mums to spend without, in theory, being responsible for their kids. Yet, every day I speak with mothers who feel totally blindsided by the overwhelm and sheer intensity of modern motherhood. These mums feel like they're drowning, while the other mums around them seem to be swimming across the English Channel in record time or while wearing full makeup. Am I the only one not keeping up? Maybe I'm just not cut out for motherhood after all, is the general theme of our conversations. It's not just you, Mama, and it wasn't always this way. I'm no historian, but what I'm about to share will shed some light on why so many of us feel not just near capacity, but crumpled somewhere over the other side of that tipping point. Since time eternal, humans have banded together in groups that are believed to have been largely nomadic, following seasonal cues to get from one place to another in order to forage for, harvest, and hunt the food they needed to survive. Once agriculture became the in thing, people started making more permanent settlements and village life came to be. In both of these situations, people within the groups contributed in different ways and recognized that they all relied on one another, either for their own direct survival, for example, to be cared for if sick, to know how to prepare certain foods that would otherwise be poisonous, or the survival of their village as a whole by bearing children. Subsistence farming, where you grow enough food for your family or village to get by and maybe a little extra to trade or sell, was the norm for the majority of humans for a long time. When industrialization happened through the 19th century, people left farmlands to create cities based around factories. Families and agricultural systems were disrupted by mostly men leaving to seek work in these cities in exchange for money, and mostly women leaving to live with their husbands and raise children. The old ways of the village were lost, and mums were left without their mothers, grandmas, and aunties to raise their children without elders for the first time. A new kind of village arose that involved women banding together in working class areas, collectively caring for one another and their children. The idea of mumming together sounds great in theory, but I would caution against glamorizing this time. Disease, famine, overcrowding, and poverty were rife. During the First World War, women were called upon to join the war effort on the home front in industries like making ammunition, nursing, and transport. When the returning soldiers came back, the women slotted back into home life. This pattern repeated in World War II, and women were coerced to vacate their positions for returning male soldiers by the media and government, who pumped out propaganda suggesting a good wife's place was in the home. For most of the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, children were to be seen and not heard. Often they were sent outside to play with the instruction to be home in time for dinner, while mum kept her house meticulously clean and entertained her husband's bosses and colleagues. For the majority of Australians, one, male, income was enough to cover the family's living costs. The concept of the good wife was strong, but standards for what made a good mother were less rigid. So long as her kids had food to eat and left the house well dressed, she was probably all set. Good wives often spent social time with other good wives, perhaps the wives of their husband's work colleagues, neighbours, or members of their church. Families often lived in relatively close proximity, and older children participated in the caretaking of younger ones. Women's time was full, although not necessarily fulfilling. Yet, beyond babyhood, it was not full of direct childcare. The 1970s women's rights movement saw the daughters of these women pushing back against the idea that homemaking and having babies were their only life options. The contraceptive pill had become available in the 1960s, and the combination of birth control, free university education, and workplace anti-discrimination laws saw more women enter and stay in the skilled workforce during the 1970s and 80s than ever before. Around the same time as women gained more workplace rights, the attachment theory of parenting started to emerge in the research literature and popular consciousness. Prior to this, mothers had been told by doctors to follow strict baby care routines and even withhold affection from their babies so as not to spoil or indulge them. The rigid rules of the old ways didn't fit with the emerging science around the creation of secure attachment between baby and mum to foster the emotional and intellectual development of the child. In the 1990s, Australian government policy made buying real estate as an investment more appealing. As wealthy people bought up property, the cost of renting or buying somewhere to live increased dramatically. By the year 2000, it was almost impossible for families to cover their basic cost of living with only one income earner. Nowadays, if mothers dare to choose caring for their kids over economic productivity, or can't find a job that actually fits with the needs of their children, they are either labelled as living a life of luxury or lumped as neglectful leeches on the welfare system. The consistent chipping away of government welfare support for parents since the 1970s, to the point where more than 1/3 of single mothers and their children live below the poverty line, is testament to the devaluation of mothers' care work. Over the last 70 years, the social expectations of what it means to be a good woman changed dramatically. The 1950s homemaker has added loyal worker, attentive, securely attached mother, and all the other jobs that go with these to her portfolio at lightning speed. While mothers grapple with the era of what Hayes in 1996 termed intensive mothering, fathers have had little change to their social brief. Bring home the bacon, mow the lawn, read a book at bedtime, and eventually teach their kids to ride bikes and drive cars. And soon cars will drive themselves anyway. Before we go on here, I have to say that this is how the pattern has played out in the majority of white middle-class families I know. This is not the case for all mothers across the Western world. African American mothers, for example, have combined working for pay, housekeeping, and mothering for generations. Single mothers are another group who have done a disproportionate amount of juggling, underappreciated and undervalued for many years. It is only now that white, hetero, married women like me are struggling to, albeit to a much lesser degree due to factors associated with white privilege, that this issue is starting to get any airtime. What looks on the outside as modern mums having it all, as loving mothers, career women, and domestic goddesses, actually translate to doing it all until we burn out. When we reach out for support in some way, the establishment brings up the neoliberal line drilled into us since the time we were in nappies ourselves. Just work harder and you will succeed. The media, controlled by the same patriarchy that sets the rules for what a good mother is, salivates at the mere thought of individual work for individual reward. Conveniently, for a society based on the male breadwinner model, they claim that unpaid care work doesn't count. Sometimes you'll see a headline that will make you feel that you are the one who must be broken or defective in some way. Fathers doing more childcare than ever before, says one. Women freed from the kitchen, says another. You are not crazy at all. You are being gaslit. Yes, Dad's involvement in childcare is up by about an hour a week compared to previous decades. Unfortunately, Mum's childcare time has increased too. Yes, women's average housework time is down by about an hour a week. What sucks is that this time has been gobbled up by spending more time in both paid work and unpaid childcare instead. Even amongst couples where mum is the primary breadwinner, her average weekly time spent on housework and childcare totals 43.4 hours, while Dad's contribution is 30.3 hours. On the whole, the most common family setup in Australia for families with kids aged 15 years and under remains that of a heterosexual couple where the father is employed full-time and mother is employed part-time. My friend Tara returned to her job in finance 3 days per week when her baby Isabel was 9 months old. She describes her week. Brendan leaves early, so I get us ready and packed for the day and drop her to daycare before work. She cries as I leave. I hate leaving her like that. They tell me she's happy within a few minutes anyway. My bosses agreed to 3 days a week, but I still cram the same load in as the full-timers do. I'm super efficient now, although I'll never be considered for a promotion if I'm technically part-time, which is super frustrating. I pump milk for Isabel on my bathroom breaks and eat lunch at my desk. I do what I have to do to leave on time. Being the last parent picking their kid up feels like winning the Worst Mum Ever award. When we get home, I cook dinner with her on my hip and have our meal on the table for 7 p.m. when Brendan walks in the door. He baths Isabel and reads her a book while I clean up the kitchen. Then I breastfeed her and rock her to sleep. I shower and go to bed. Some nights he wants to snuggle, but the idea of anyone touching me is repulsive. My 2 days off are for life admin, swimming lessons, medical appointments, waiting for tradies that never show up. Weekends are taken up by his soccer on Saturdays and family days on Sundays. Sometimes I wonder, when will there be time for me? Before Isabel, I thought I wanted 2 kids close in age. Other mums seem to manage it, but there is no way I would cope. Tara's not alone in feeling the squeeze, while her partner's life remains pretty similar pre- and post-baby. As mums pick up more paid work, their total unpaid and paid work time per week climbs, with this work performed at a higher intensity and less sociable hours. Time use data indicates that a father's total paid and unpaid work remains steady between 72 and 73 hours per week, regardless of how many hours their partner works outside the home. Mums like Tara do the hard yards and more of it. Research by Lynn Craig in 2006 indicates that mums spend more of their time multitasking childcare and housework than dads, and also more time driving their children to wherever they need to go. Her report demonstrates that mums care for kids alone 29% of the time and spend 51% of their total care time doing the dirty work of physical care tasks and meeting emotional needs. Conversely, dads spend more time focused on purely fun, interactive childcare tasks like reading or playing, and are without the backup of another adult, only 8% of the time. Enter 2020 and COVID-19, and working from home for all but essential workers happened overnight. Like magic, the veil between paid work outside the home and unpaid work inside it was lifted. World over, dads working from home had their eyes opened to the reality of never-ending days and nights with children present. Or did they? One mum I spoke with told me how her husband had taken 6 weeks off paid work to care for their 4-year-old while she grew their unborn second child and worked on a major project. On day 3 of lockdown inside their flat, rain pouring outside, she told me she saw the life drain from his eyes as the realization dawned on him of what constant caregiving was like. They were playing shop for the 400th time. This wasn't the beautiful bonding time he thought it would be. It was torture behind a locked door. The only difference was that I was there, perpetually interruptible and on call when he needed a break. I wasn't the one down on the floor with her, but I was still the mental coordinator. I could still remind him that it was almost time for her lunch, or that she really needed to be bathed before dinner. I wish I could say he gets what it's like for me now, but I don't think he will ever understand fully what it's like to be mum. During May 2020, researchers Craig and Churchill surveyed over 2,000 dual-earner couple families living in lockdown conditions in Australia. The data they collected from families over a 3-week period indicated that mothers were spending 14.64 hours per day doing primary work, paid work, housework, and caring for children, plus an additional 5.03 hours supervising kids. Fathers were spending 12.72 hours across primary tasks and 3.54 hours as supervisors. This adds to a daily disparity of 3.41 hours per day more work for women and an extra 17 hours across a standard Monday to Friday working week. In the same study, over 50% of mothers reported feeling somewhat dissatisfied or extremely dissatisfied with their division of household and childcare work, feeling they were shouldering a disproportionate share of the load. The really scary part? 87.8% of fathers involved in the research reported that they were doing at or above their fair share of unpaid duties. It seems that maybe dads didn't get the memo after all. If any of this resonates with you, take heart. You may be overworked, underappreciated, undervalued, underpaid, and all around undersupported, but you are not broken. Tara could be any mum you know, or even one you don't. Maybe she is the mum you see picking kids up from school with a smile. Maybe she is the mum with her baby in a sling and toddler in the shopping trolley, singing songs and doing her best to stay calm while being pestered for an ice block by an increasingly irrational small person. Maybe she is your best friend, your sister, the mum you follow on Instagram. Perhaps she is the mum you pass pushing twins or 2 under 2 in a double pram, the social symbol that suggests multiple children should be looked after by one woman instead of an entire support network of adults. Maybe she is the mother with the unsettled baby at the pharmacy, desperately seeking sleep. She might be the mother assisting her child with autism who is having a meltdown because she didn't accurately replicate how the Titanic broke apart and sank in 2 pieces using a Lego model in the holiday park swimming pool. Maybe she is the mother with sensory processing problems herself, who is so overloaded by caring for her demanding toddler alone for hours on end while also being wife and worker and housekeeper and all the things that she reaches breaking point and winds up with a stay in the mental health ward. Maybe she is you. In one way or another, I believe she is all of us. I wish I had easy solutions to this pervasive problem, but while we are doing pretty well navigating the ever-changing tides of couple with kid life, even I don't have the ocean that is maternal overwhelm mastered. Like Tara and Brendan, my husband and I made a commitment to equal parenting. We wanted to be a united front to share the load as equally as we could. Even with the best intentions, I still end up feeling overwhelmed at times and have found this chapter incredibly challenging to write. I have heard her calling for me often as I attempt to write and rewrite this chapter, and I remind myself that swooping in to save the day doesn't serve any of us. I am also nervous about it being perceived as man-bashing or being ungrateful. Spoiled brat is the label ringing in my ears, the next one for me to unpack and be rid of. It is time to install a new belief. I can be grateful for what I have while still wanting more support, both for myself and for other mothers. I can't be certain that we'll get it right within our own 4 walls every single time, but I'm hopeful that by the time my daughter might become a mother herself, she won't feel the squeeze of trying to do it all, or be treated like a downtrodden doormat by broader social policies. The steps we take now are what will make this dream a reality for her. There are some sweeping changes at the level of government policy that would make an immediate and major difference for women and children. Expert analysts, researchers, and philosophers like Professor Nancy Fraser argue that changing our economy from one based on paying breadwinners to a universal caregiver model where everyone is equitably involved in caring is a key step in redistributing and valuing that which is considered women's work. If this model was accepted, it would become essential, for example, to demonstrate on a job application that you undertake care work for children, for elderly, for a person with disability, for the homeless, for the environment, on a regular basis, to be considered as a potentially valuable and ethical employee. Access to employment or a husband would not be the only ways for mothers to avoid poverty, as a universal basic income would be in place to protect our most vulnerable people and vital carers from falling through profit-driven social gaps. Even without economic remodelling, attributing a dollar value to human breast milk, and therefore the time mothers spend feeding directly or pumping, could also see the contribution of mothers better quantified and economically respected. This has the potential to raise rates of breastfeeding overall, as well as garnering support for the practical implementation of lactation policy in the workplace. While the idea of placing a monetary value on the breast milk I make and give my child with love isn't one I'm completely comfortable with, the maths isn't hard. Increased breastfeeding amongst those mothers who want to do it equals better health for infants, both in the short term and across their lifetimes. Longer-term breastfeeding also improves health outcomes for mothers, and the reductions in healthcare expenditure for both parties would save taxpayers a bucket load. Increasing the duration and monetary value of both maternity and paternity leave at the legislative level and encouraging both parents to actually use it at a workplace level is another key strategy to get the caregiving balance right from the start of family life. Long-term paid leave, like in Finland, where both parents get 7 months paid, non-transferable parental leave, has been shown to improve maternal coping, reduce maternal mental and physical healthcare costs, and may create a more equitable split in caregiving. Many of the strategies that would support mothers rely on increasing taxation rather than cutting it, so thinking ahead and reviewing the ways we cast our election votes may be one of the most powerful tools we have to reduce our long-term overwhelm. There are over 6 million mothers in Australia, so we have the potential to be a powerful voting bloc if we mobilise together. If these are the long-term solutions, what can we do for ourselves to feel less overwhelmed and altogether better now? On the small scale, there are steps we can take within our own homes and lives today. Here are a few ideas to try. Get others involved in the care of your children. There is the old adage that it takes a village to raise a child. Babies raised in the hunter-gatherer Efe community in Central Africa have on average 14 different adult caregivers per day. I realised that this is a pretty lofty aim, requiring significant resources, trust, and time investment, and that it may not be accessible to everyone due to our personal or pandemic-related reasons, but we can try our best. It has taken almost 2 years, but on quick head count, we've built up 11 different attachment figures providing care for my daughter, whether a few minutes or a few hours, alone or in partnership, in the last 8 days. Is there a grandparent, friend, widow, or teenager next door that you could come to count on regularly? Is there a non-mum friend who'd love to have dinner cooked for them each Wednesday in return for an hour of fun playing with your kid? Building your village is an exciting, creative, and challenging process. These people might do things differently to you, but variety is the spice of life, and your child will learn different things with different people. If it's really not possible, all is not lost. If you have a partner, leave. When I wrote this heading, I meant leave for a few hours, but take it as you will. The State of the World's Fathers 2019 report encourages dads to take up an extra 50 minutes or more of additional unpaid care work per day. To do anything less than this, the report suggests, is to perpetuate unequal workloads shouldered by mothers now, and also for their daughters long term. Extra time spent providing care for their kids would do a great deal in both making men feel capable in performing childcare and reducing the prevailing belief that women are naturally better at it. If it's safe to leave your kids with your partner or their other parent for a while, I'd encourage you to give it a go, whether for an hour or a weekend. Even better, do it often. A regular Saturday morning yoga class and time out has been a game changer for me. Don't write pages of instructions either. Our partners and support people are not going to find their own ways of doing things if we're leaving marking criteria every time they give it a try. Check in with what's important to you. Cast your mind back to Chapter 1 and Dr. Brock's conception of the perfect mother myth. Much overwhelm comes from living up to the mythical ideal mother standards. No dad has ever been accused of being a bad father for not baking his son dinosaur-themed cupcakes to take into kindy for his birthday, so you're not a failed mother if you skip baking or any other social performance of motherhood. Check that the standards you are trying to meet are your own, not ones that have been embedded in your brain from your social or family conditioning. Come to my house, for example, and I'm not going to run around like a maniac tidying up before you arrive in order to present a picture of effortless home cleanliness. As much as it is tempting sometimes, I remind myself that I am symbolically modeling for my daughter that she does not have to hide the messiness of her real life to be worthy of friendship. This is ongoing work, so go gently. There is no rush to dismantle and rebuild your life and value system overnight. Lower your standards selectively. Lowering standards is often recommended to mothers in relation to housework. Honestly, unless you are ironing pajamas and scrubbing each piece of grout in your bathroom with a toothbrush, there's only so much lowering of standards that can be done to maintain a functioning household. My recommendation is for mothers to lower their standards in some areas, but to do so selectively. We also want to be careful not to set our standards too low for others when they are caring for our kids. It is easy to let men off the hook for not trying hard to provide proper care. For example, always allowing drive-through meals on the night you work evening shift, when you cook all other dinners through the week, while helping one child with their homework and preventing the other from drawing on your walls with crayons. Lowering our expectations of other caregivers can oversimplify and discredit the complexity of the work mothers do, reinforce the idea that men are naturally less competent caregivers, and make us less likely to feel able to leave for longer periods. Grounding practices. Some people love mindfulness, journaling, or movement practices to center themselves. For me, a few deep breaths can help take me out of the loop of 1, feeling overwhelmed, 2, trying harder to meet impossible expectations, 3, falling short, 4, feeling more overwhelmed, 5, rinse and repeat. Try breathing in gently for the count of 4, then breathing out slowly for the count of 8. I like to repeat this a few times until I feel my heart rate is slowing down and my mind is becoming clearer. This breathing technique helps to set your nervous system more towards the calm end of the scale, rather than the fight, flight, or freeze mode we spend so much of our time in. Listen to your body. Craving sugar or caffeine, needing a wine to wind down, difficulty losing baby weight or keep weight on, and having trouble switching off are all signs that our bodies are trying to tell us something. There are a whole host of menstrual, thyroid, weight, hormone, and stress-related physical health problems that Dr. Libby Weaver has termed the rushing woman syndrome, and her book of the same name may hold some answers for you. Dr. Oscar Serralak's The Postnatal Depletion Cure is another must-read if you're feeling drained, agitated, or generally off colour. Reading those books, checking in with your GP, and getting a natural health team on your side are all things that could be of great benefit in reducing your feelings of overwhelm and the fatigue that comes with it. Move your body with care and love. As an accredited exercise physiologist, I have consulted with countless overwhelmed, exhausted mothers who came to me for workout advice. These women had started at the gym, doing high-intensity classes and watching what they ate, but their weight just wouldn't shift. Some were getting up at 4:30 a.m. to make it happen. What these women actually needed was to slow down the pace of their lives and sleep more, not add more hecticness to their days. In my mind, strengthening exercises and hard cardio come later, not first up. That said, movement and physical activity can be a wonderful release from overwhelm. Activities like gentle yoga and gentle Pilates that match movement and breath and stop us looking at our smartphones are particularly good for overwhelmed women. Walking in nature is another brilliant option. Like the breathing technique I mentioned, they help to reset our nervous systems towards rest and digest mode as well as to sleep better. Fall in love with aeroplane mode. Aeroplane mode sets your smartphone as a clock and camera only. Try it from bedtime until you're fully awake in the morning. You won't miss your alarm, you'll still have a torch at hand in the night. What you won't have is 74 notifications, depressing news headlines, or anyone else's social media highlight reel penetrating your sleepy consciousness before you're even upright. If this is working for you already, you might like to go the whole hog and switch off your devices overnight, or leave them out of your bedroom altogether. Give yourself a pep talk. Many of the mums I work with have affirmation cards around their house in the lead up to labour and birth. Why not use the same strategy after your kids are earthside? Think glorious cards like, I love myself unconditionally and this too shall pass, stuck around your home. Even if you don't feel like a fountain of self-love just yet, we can start heading in the right direction of self-acceptance and kinder self-talk. Fake it till you make it, mama. Check in with someone. Having a check-in buddy can be so useful. Chats that go beyond, how was your day, to how was your day really, can be tonic for a frazzled mama. Sometimes there is just too much to say though, particularly if you are wrangling kids at the same time. A couple of friends and I use a voice messaging app to keep tabs on one another's mental health, which works better for us than scheduling and rescheduling countless phone or face-to-face meetups. Automate or delegate externally. One thing I suggest to all families expecting babies is to make a recurring weekly grocery order of the essentials, ideally for delivery. This is something we started when my daughter was newborn, and it is still helping lighten our load 20 months later. What else can you automate? Perhaps there are bills that can be paid by direct debit. Can you reduce the number of errands that need running? There might be a mobile mechanic who'd love to service your car at home. If you have financial scope to delegate outside the family, swallow your ideal housewife pride and do that too. Can you afford a cleaner fortnightly to do the bathrooms? Can someone do your bookkeeping for the family business faster than you can with children to supervise? These are for your health and happiness and are not luxury spending, no matter what Nana might think. Keep a family schedule visible. We keep a schedule on our fridge with all the week's happenings, bills, errands, and main household jobs to be done between us all. Using this system lets my husband and I both see not only what is coming up, but also just how much either of us are actually contributing to the running of the house. As our daughter gets older, jobs that are her responsibility to help with or perform independently will be added to the schedule, and she will officially join our household team. It also helps me to pace myself by literally scheduling rest time, seeing what jobs aren't worth worrying about until later in the week, and seeing the week's commitments as a whole. I know that I am at my best when I have time alone locked in, and there are only a couple of additional out-of-the-ordinary events per week. If there are any more than 2 extra things on per week, I start to feel time pressured and rushed, so it helps me prioritize which invitations I want to accept and when to decline, which leads me to my next point. Say no to things. 6 Christmas party invitations? You don't have to go to any of them if you don't want to. Family lunch right on nap time, an hour away from home? You can graciously decline. Saying no to things is a radical act of self-care. It's hard at first, but it gets easier with practice. I highly recommend it. Have a mentor. Each stage of child development and transition point, like returning to work, comes with massive adjustments for mothers. A post-birth support professional or counsellor who has walked this path before you and understands the unique pressures mums face is invaluable to feel heard and to see that you will get through this. As someone who is a mama mentor and receives mentoring herself, this has been one of the biggest factors in reducing overwhelm in my experience of motherhood to date. Put good vibes out into the world. I realise that when we are overwhelmed, we're probably not going to be dancing like Beyonce while cooking dinner or feeling thrilled about stomping through mud with our preschoolers. That said, if we are speeding and cutting people off in traffic, we're probably going to wind up stuck behind an old man sedan driver with a straw hat in the back window. We are magnets and we want to pull good things to us rather than repulse them away. If we're giving out, "If you loved me, you'd do the vacuuming" vibes, we're probably not going to have as much success as, "Would you mind vacuuming while I do this so we've got more time to head to the beach together, watch a movie, or snuggle later?" kind of vibes. I hate the idea that overworked women need to change their behaviour to coax lazy men into pulling their weight, but sometimes being the sweet honeypot rather than the bee frantically visiting every flower to make the honey ourselves can get the desired result much more quickly. If you have made it to this point, I thank you from the bottom of my heart that you have taken the time to read or listen to this when already facing immense time pressure and stress is huge. I'd invite you to pause here to take a breath, reflect, and perhaps do some planning rather than skipping on to the next section. May we walk together along the path to a more meaningful and medium-paced version of modern motherhood, one step at a time. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Please remember to subscribe and leave a 5-star review and share with anyone you feel may benefit from this content. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join me on social media at Anna Cusack Postpartum and head to my website www.annacusack.com.au to check out the ways we can work together. Please use the contact form on the website to inquire about having me run workshops with your client groups or book me for corporate speaking or professional development presentations. See you next episode.